All right, so I want to begin tonight by talking about a couple of terms you're likely to run into and to fill in some of the back information uh, that will help you get a handle around some of the articles that you're going to read this week. So, one of the terms that you're going to read is the word phenomenology. It is a philosophical method and the word was more or less invented by a German named Edmund Husserl. If you recall, the semester we said that in the 17th century, there is a split that occurs in Western philosophy. And that split is characterized by the different methodologies of Edward Herbert and René Descartes. We said that Descartes picks up the classical a priori view of human nature, which is a kind of abstract definition. Let's assume that Aristotle was right. Therefore, what can we say about what it means to be human? Herbert's argument was 180 degrees the other way. A posteriori means after the fact. And you'll recall he said the key is observation. The assumption that he made was that the world was intelligible and ordered, and that both that intelligibility and that order ultimately came from God. So we said that thinking about Herbert in particular, there are different, for lack of a better word, schools of thought that develop. One of which is empiricism. Empiricism says the only knowledge we have is knowledge of appearances. And the other option became natural theology. And its cousin, deism. Both assuming that the nature of the world is such that there is an order and intelligibility to the world which is independent of humans and which is ultimately traceable to God. And this is the kind of concept that we in the modern world understand as intelligent design. All right, are we okay so far? Everybody following?
Yes.
Tyler, make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the points that we made over the course of the semester was that in the end, both of these fail. Descartes fails because it assumes things we can't presume, or we can't prove actually. So you may remember his link is that if I have the concept of perfect in my head, there must be a perfect being, because no human can conceive of that. No human can conceive of a perfect idea. Herbert ended in the radical moral relativity and subjectivity of the modern world. As someone in one of my philosophy classes said today, we all have our own truth. In the famous words of Kellyanne Conway when Trump was president, it's not a lie, it's an alternate fact. So we've witnessed the fabric of Western culture completely come apart at the seams. There is no truth. Everything is relative to whoever decides it's true. Well, one of the ways in which philosophers have attempted to deal with this is through the concept of phenomenology. A phenomenology is not a logical system. It attempts to have no assumptions and no prior commitments. What it focuses on is describing human experience. And the key is the word describing. So in some respects, it's closer to poetry and to myth than it is to a traditional philosophical system. In the 20th century, Husserl's book, The Cartesian Meditations, outlined his phenomenology. Cartesian is a reference to Descartes. And as such, its focus is consciousness. The other main phenomenologist is Martin Heidegger. And Heidegger, his main book was called Being and Time. And his primary focus is, what does it mean to be in the world? Heidegger will draw on two main traditions, Immanuel Kant and Friedrich Nietzsche, both of whom we've talked about in passing the semester. Okay, let me stop there. This is a lot to get. Any questions so far? Welcome to those of you who just joined us. What I am basically doing is talking about one of the very important terms in one of the articles that you're going to read this week, which is phenomenology. And while you'll be able to catch up when you watch the video tomorrow, the main point is that phenomenology is a different type of philosophical method. It is not a system. It attempts to have no assumptions and no prior commitments. It does not assume that God exists or that the world is intelligible. It doesn't exclude either of those possibilities, but it doesn't assume them either. To that extent, it's closer to poetry and to myth than it is to a philosophical system. In the 20th century, the two main proponents were Martin Heidegger and Edmund Husserl. Okay, any questions so far? All right, I hope that's helpful. What I want to do right now, before we focus on the subject at hand for the week, is I want to give you a little bit more background on Martin Heidegger. In the name of full disclosure, my intellectual tradition Albert Camus died in 1960. Heidegger died later, but Camus was dependent on Heidegger, as Heidegger was dependent on Nietzsche. So if you've noticed, if you've had any other philosophical classes, if you've noticed that my method and my approach is different, this is why it's different. All right, so let's take a closer look at Heidegger. Heidegger says, yep, I suck at drawing. Let me try this again. See if I can get it a little bit better. Try a smaller circle. One day I might take an art class. Heidegger says we are born at a time and place we do not choose. We die at a time and a place we do not choose. We emerge from no-thingness and we pass into no-thingness. Death, says Heidegger, is a paradox. It is a paradox because it is the fulfillment of our humanity. In effect, all humans are born to die. But it is the end of our humanity. So Heidegger says that at some point, we realize that we are thrown towards death, that we can't avoid it, we cannot escape it. It is as though from the moment we emerge from the womb, someone has pushed us or thrown us towards death. Heidegger says that in the face of this thrownness, we experienced angst. We banter that word around a lot in English, but angst in German is not translatable into English. Think about it this way. About 3 years ago, I was making a left-hand turn. I was stopped. I waited for a car coming down the hill in my direction to pass me. As I made a left-hand turn, I realized that someone was running a stop sign and all I could see was that she was going to come through the front of my car and kill me. That experience was angst. Despair is only a very small part of that. Heidegger says that in the face of that angst, I have two choices: despair and denial, or Sorg. We'll come back to Sorg in a minute. It's not translatable into English either. That's S-O-R-G-E. This is Nietzsche's world of Das Mann, the herd, mediocrity. It is a world in which we attempt to very clearly establish good and evil. And we create a God who becomes the foundation for good and evil. And that is the God that Nietzsche said was dead. Sorg cannot be translated into English, but it means many things: love, kindness, care, concern, empathy. So to take this a step further, before we begin talking about sustainability, in the world, we encounter two types of objects. There are those that are there alongside, and those that are present to hand. Everything that is not human, dogs, cats, rabbits, stones, bushes, trees, are present to hand. When I recognize that that object is also thrown towards death, I recognize that object is human. And in that moment, there is a pattern of behavior that is called for. That includes respect, love, empathy, kindness, care, concern. All right, let me stop there. Are there questions? Are we making sense? Whitley, what do you think?
I don't know what to say.
Okay. Would you like me to reframe it?
I mean, like, I understand what you're saying about, well, I am not very good at pronouncing names, but
Heidegger?
yes, Martin.
Yep.
And I don't know, I did a Google search on him, so I'm just reading about him a little bit.
That's okay. Guys, I know this is your first time. All I want to do is help you understand as much as you can, so it's okay. This is pretty dense stuff.
It
Go
says
ahead.
something about he diagnosed modern humanity as suffering from a number of new diseases of the soul.
Yep. Although Heidegger would never use the word soul. For Heidegger, what matters is being human. I tell my students that in the end, there is really only one philosophical question, and that is this: And the answer is this. To love in a world in which all that is human dies. And that is essentially what Heidegger is saying. And that gets picked up by Camus, because he will say that in an absurd world, only the absurd makes sense. And nothing is more absurd than loving in a world in which all that is human dies. If you think about one of the first readings in the class, when we were talking about Erich Fromm, we said that Fromm argued that there were three types of cultures: life negative, life neutral, and life affirmative. In a life affirmative culture, the core is love. In a life negative culture, the core is despair and denial. To put it very simply, if I truly love in a world in which all that is human dies, will I ever objectify women? No. Will I ever discriminate against someone because of their sexuality, their origin, their politics? No. Loving in a world in which all that is human dies, by definition, has to be unconditional. And that's why it becomes transformative. Is this making sense? I know it's a lot to get. What are we thinking? Dahlia, what are your thoughts about this?
I think it makes sense. I'm just trying to take notes and make sure I'm understanding which philosopher his idea is with which, and I think that's something I kind of have a hard time to, so I just tend to study a little bit more.
Helpful? Tyler, what do you think?
I think it's interesting. Sorry, I was just typing. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, but
Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts? Is there anything else I can clarify before I delete this and we move on? Okay. Well, I give you another minute to think about this. when you hear me talk about this, can you see why I've taken some of the positions I've taken in class this semester? This is the way I see the world. I'll let you think about that. I know you don't know me very well. And as I said earlier, this is not the best venue for a teacher who would prefer to see the eyes of his students. But it is, as they say, what we have to work with. So if you think about this in terms of corporate responsibility, if we think about sustainability, in terms of what we just said, then it has to be about more than money. It's about building a human and humane society. It's not about profit. And as I said a number of times this semester, the problem is not capitalism. The problem is what has been done under the name of capitalism. So think about the conversation we had about social Darwinism. Social Darwinism inherently assumes some people are better than others and therefore deserve more. Some people can be used. We call them workers. They can be discarded. They have no inherent value. And we say the same things about the environment. It's to be used, it's to be dominated, it's to be controlled. It's to serve us. We have no responsibility to the environment. Another term that we've talked about a lot this semester is paradigm or world view. The capitalist model as we inherit it is in debt to the 19th century for its intellectual framework. It is at its core dependent on comments made in Genesis. It specifically focuses on the comment that humans are given dominion over the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. And the assumption that's made in that model is that it is ours to do with as we please. And in the same way that we don't have responsibility to our fellow men, we don't have responsibility to the environment. None. So when you think about the implications of this paradigm, not only is the argument made that they are not responsible, but they can't conceive of the damage being done. Put it this way, if God gave us the universe to do with as we pleased, how could we be damaging it? It's ours to use any way that we want. So one of the problems we face when we talk about sustainability, when we talk about ecology in business, is breaking a paradigm that assumes that the physical world has no value. It's ours to be used. So just like Trump could say, I don't know what people of color want, I've done more for them than any president in history. The unfortunate fact is that in his paradigm, he did. And someone who takes that stand is not going to see that there is a responsibility to the environment or a need to make sure that the damage done is healed. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Whitley?
Yes.
Thank you, Dale.
Yeah.
Okay. So the problem becomes, how do you make someone in that paradigm understand? It's also particularly complicated because we know that in that worldview, profit is all that matters. So we have the same reaction to the environment that we have to social welfare. Wait, you expect me to pay for universal health care? That's compromising my profit. I'm Duke Power. I pollute a river with coal ash. You expect me to pay for that? Oh, I'll pay for that. I'll raise my electric rates. So we keep coming back to one of the fundamental themes that we've talked about this semester. And unfortunately, if you go back through some of the conversations we've had this semester, this is not a problem that's simply and solely a problem in business. This is where we are in the 21st century. This is our world. No one has any responsibility. Nothing really matters. It's all about me. So it isn't about capitalism. It is about decisions we make when we implement capitalism. For example, I'm not going to deny that it's important for people to invest in a company to make a profit. But try this. How much is enough? Or how about this? Have you heard of this term? Brain drain? Anyone know what that is? Okay, until the early part of this century, people from other countries came here to get PhDs, or they came here because of the perception of opportunity. So many people, for example, who came from India and got PhDs in engineering never went back to India. So we were effectively draining the brains of other countries. And one of the reasons we became the technology capital of the world, one of the reasons we have the largest capital, the largest economy in the world, is because of our ability to attract intelligent people with innovative ideas. Well, about 20 years ago, the drain started going the other way. And to make matters worse, we may invent the technology here, but it's Japan, China, Korea, third world countries that ultimately make it. So when we talk about sustainability, it falls into the same scenario. Eventually, if we don't fix the environment, we're going to pay for it. All right, questions, thoughts? Tyler, what's going on in your head tonight?
I mean, I think it kind of just relates honestly to everything we've been talking about this semester. You know, if companies are just worried about it cutting into their profit. I mean, it's really all they're concerned with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then we want to think about questions like, how do we change the paradigm? If the problem is in capitalism, how do we build an economy based on capitalism that thinks about the world differently? I think that one of the problems is that my student this morning was right. But there's a huge price for this. And that price is we have no sense of the common good. In fact, we have no real sense we don't have a good at all. We have 350 million different goods. And sometimes when they overlap, we have a tribe. But for the most part, we are and to that extent, The companies in our world only mirror the way that we behave. Narcissistic, selfish, and self-centered. Caring about ourselves to the exclusion of others is no different than saying that profit is all that matters. So when you ghost someone or cancel them, it's not really different than polluting a river with coal ash. Complex social problems require complex solutions. What's happening in the business world is a symptom of a deeper problem. And that deeper problem is we are not behaving in a human and humane way. Because if we did, most of the social problems we have would not exist. Am I making sense?
Yes.
So for me, as we begin to come towards the end of this class, it's really a very simple question. Is X the human and humane thing to do? Objectifying someone is not. Disrespect is not. Canceling is not. Ghosting is not. 1 out of 4 children going to bed in this county tonight hungry is not. 1 out of 5 seniors being unable to pay their electric bill is not. Focusing on profit and laying off people to maximize profit is not. So before I sum up, thoughts, questions? Are you beginning to see how the whole of the course and everything that we've been talking about this semester fits together? Whitley,
Yeah.
is it all fitting together?
It's coming together piece by piece. I just am thinking of just random stuff right now, like how much I really hate Duke Energy. Like I cannot express in words how much I hate that that company.
Well, I understand. And they're not alone. When I was working as a consultant to what used to be AT&T Bell Labs, and is now a company called Lucent, we went to visit Florida Light and Power because we were going to offer them a new computer network that would have cut their IT costs by 30%. And the VP of IT said, why would I do that? I'm guaranteed a 13% profit. I have no incentive to be efficient. In a selfish world, if I'm the CEO of a Fortune 1000, a Fortune 100, if I don't have a conscience, I have no incentive to take care of my people. And if the paradigm says that my people have no value, why would I value my people? The answer is you won't. So to put it more graphically, I was Catholic at the time. When I was 17, the woman I married and I went to a pre-Cana conference, which is a kind of pre-wedding indoctrination by the Catholic Church. I had been thrown out of the church because I refused to acknowledge a responsibility to kill communists for Christ. And a young priest convinced me and the woman I eventually married to come back to the church. We started a missionary parish, and at one point we were collecting more canned goods in one mass than the entire main church did in 6. So the young priest got summoned to the archbishop's office, and the archbishop said, "So Michael, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And Michael said, "I want to go to the Louvain and get my degree, my PhD in theology, come back and teach at a seminary." "Well," he said, "I can't help you because you're arrogant. So what I'm going to do is send you to the poorest parish in Hartford, Connecticut. And you'll learn humility. And maybe at some point you'll get your PhD." Well, my wife became pregnant, my son was born, and I invited Michael, who had been at my wedding, had officiated at the wedding, to come and baptize my son. I can promise you that at that point in my life, I was still pretty much a mainline Catholic, as opposed to now when I'm simply a heretic. And Michael's response was, "I can't officiate because some of your thoughts are inconsistent with the theology of the Catholic Church." He got caught in the paradigm. And the same thing is true of every president of the United States. You don't get to run for political office if you don't internalize the paradigm of the political party. You don't get to become the CEO of a company if you don't internalize the paradigm. So we come back to one of the fundamental truths. To change the world, we have to change the paradigm. It's not sufficient to pass laws. The assumptions have to change. So when we talk about sustainability, it's not just about changing the concept of profitability. We also have to change the idea that we have total and complete dominion over the universe and no responsibility to go with it. Does that help? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay. Any
I
other
guess
last questions?
I guess it's not a question, but it's kind of like whenever you're raising a child and you're trying to teach them like the right behaviors and how to process like activities and stuff. Like if they were to spill a drink on the floor, you don't just walk away from it and ignore it. You would go and you'd get like the tools to clean it up, and then you would throw those tools or like the paper towels and stuff in the trash, and then you would move on. I guess it's like implementing little.
Well, you're right, but I would go even further. If you were running a human and humane company, you would take all the appropriate steps to stop the river from being polluted with coal ash. Or think about this. Don't quote me, but I believe there was sufficient evidence before World War II that asbestos was carcinogenic and toxic. And everybody looked the other way. We knew long before the 1960s and even today, get a tobacco company to admit responsibility. No, their comment is, we didn't put the cigarette in your hand. There's a disclaimer on the box. It's your problem. You did it. We didn't. We're not liable. Well, I can just as easily say you don't have to be in the tobacco business. There is ample evidence that suggests that vaping is designed to ultimately push you into smoking cigarettes. We know that tobacco companies doctor the amount of nicotine because nicotine is addictive to get you and keep you hooked. In one of my last corporate jobs, I listened to the VP of PR attempting to convince a writer for a science magazine that the agrochemicals this company produced were not causing mutations in fish, in amphibians, and in some of the farm animals. Do you see my point?
So we have to make humane. We have to make the right choice the first time. We have to act responsibly towards everybody and not just be single-minded and think of ourselves. Think of everyone and everything.
Yep. Yep. And that's the point. You could just as easily argue that we've been raised to be selfish because that's what a consumer-based economy is all about. Making us be selfish so that we buy more product. Which takes us back to the question. And when you look at the United States in 2022, you can't tell me that we live in a society that is human and humane. Do you see my point?
Yeah.
Anybody not? Okay. So as we near the end of the course, go back through what we've talked about this semester. Look for the common theme. As you take what you've learned this semester and you apply it to the larger context of the world in which we live, ask yourself, is this a human and humane world? And when you conclude, as I have, that the answer is no, then the question becomes, how do we change the paradigm? How do we change the way we see the world so that the world can become human and humane? That's the question. That's the question. All right, anything else? All right, I deeply appreciate your showing up. I'm sorry it was so late. I will stop sharing my screen here, take attendance, and then I will let you go. Okay, let's see. No Megan this week, no Ashari this week. Sliding down. No Kayla Ingram. Whitney is here. And Tyler Ferguson is here. And Dayla is here. Let me find her. And who have I missed? Who else is here? I got, Ribbith. Forgot you. And I'll check one more time. All right, people, thanks. We're good. Have a great night. See you next week for the last time.